The trial that shook the galaxy. The impossible crime. The courtroom floated in the void between star systems, a massive structure built by the Galactic Tribunal centuries before Earth had even discovered fire. Inside its crystalline walls, representatives from 47 different species gathered to witness something that had never happened in recorded history, a trial against the fundamental laws of the universe itself. Captain James Rivera stood in the center of the chamber, his wrists bound with energy restraints that hummed with power. He looked small compared to the towering judges who sat on their elevated platforms. The lead judge was a chromath, an ancient being whose species had been exploring space for 3 million years. Its 6 eyes fixed on James with an expression that might have been curiosity or disgust. It was hard to tell with aliens. Human, the judge's voice resonated through every translator in the room. You stand accused of the greatest crime in galactic history. You have violated the eternal law. How do you plead? James lifted his chin. His uniform was torn and dirty from 3 weeks in a holding cell, but his eyes were steady. Not guilty. A wave of shocked whispers rippled through the assembled species. The translator in James's ear struggled to keep up with the dozens of alien languages being spoken at once. Most of them seemed to be expressing the same sentiment, disbelief. The judge's scale shifted colors, a sign of agitation. You do not deny the act itself? No, James said clearly. I did exactly what you're accusing me of. I just don't believe it was a crime. The law no one questions. To understand why 47 species were horrified by James's actions, you need to understand the eternal law. It wasn't written down anywhere. It didn't need to be. It was built into the fabric of the universe itself, or so everyone believed. The law was simple: conscious beings cannot interfere with the natural death of a star. Every species in the galaxy knew this rule. They'd learned it through bitter experience. 50,000 years ago, the Vortan Empire had tried to harvest energy from a dying star. They'd succeeded, but the consequences had been catastrophic. The star's collapse triggered a chain reaction that wiped out 17 solar systems. 3 billion Vortans died in the disaster. After that, the Galactic Council had declared the eternal law. Stars were to be left alone in their final moments. To interfere was to risk destruction on an unimaginable scale. The law had been followed without question for 50 millennia. Until 3 weeks ago, when James Rivera broke it. The prosecutor, a Decian with too many tentacles to count, slithered forward. Let the record show the defendant's confession. Now, human, tell this court why you committed this act of cosmic vandalism. James took a deep breath. Because 4 million people were going to die if I didn't. The colony no one could save. The prosecutor pulled up a holographic display. It showed a star system with a single inhabited planet. New Providence, humanity's newest colony world. 4 million settlers had been living there for only 6 years, building farms and cities, raising children, creating a new home among the stars. Then the scientists discovered the truth. The system's sun was dying, and it was dying fast. Some kind of quantum instability in its core, something that happened once in a billion years. The star would go supernova in 6 months. 6 months. Not enough time to evacuate 4 million people. Not nearly enough. You could have accepted this tragedy, the prosecutor said, its tentacles waving in emphasis. Death is a natural part of existence. The eternal law exists because interfering with stellar death processes leads to even greater catastrophes. You knew this, yes? I knew it, James admitted. Yet you proceeded anyway. You took your ship, the Defiance, and you flew directly into the dying star's corona. You deployed an experimental device of human design. A quantum stabilizer, I believe your species calls it. And you halted the star's collapse. The holographic display shifted, showing the star's transformation. The violent instability had smoothed out. The supernova had been prevented. The star was stable again, burning peacefully. 4 million people are alive because of what I did, James said quietly. 4 million humans who would have died. Children. families. People with hopes and dreams and futures. The prosecutor's skin changed to an angry purple color. And how many more will die when your interference causes unforeseen consequences? The Vorton disaster proved that tampering with stellar death leads to catastrophe. You may have doomed billions to save millions. The species that never learned. One of the judges, a gaseous being that existed inside a containment field, spoke up. Its voice was like wine through a cave. In 300,000 years of galactic civilization, no species has ever dared to break the eternal law. Not because of legal restrictions, but because of wisdom gained through catastrophe. Why do humans, who have been in space for less than 1,000 years, believe they know better than species millions of years older? James had been expecting this question. He'd thought about it constantly during his 3 weeks of imprisonment. Because we're too young to have learned to give up. The courtroom fell silent. Every species here has been exploring space longer than we have, James continued. You've seen more. You've learned more. You've watched civilizations rise and fall. And somewhere along the way, you learned that some problems can't be solved. That some disasters just have to be accepted. The eternal law made sense to you because you'd already stopped believing you could beat impossible odds. The Chromath judge leaned forward. And humans have not learned this lesson? Not yet, James said with a slight smile. Maybe we will someday. Maybe after another 1,000,000 years, we'll be as wise and cautious as you are. But right now, we still believe that if something seems impossible, that just means we need to try harder. We still think that rules can be rewritten if the stakes are high enough. He gestured at the holographic display showing New Providence. Those 4 million people are alive today because humanity hasn't learned to accept the unacceptable. We saw an impossible problem and we solved it anyway. Maybe that makes us reckless. Maybe it makes us dangerous. But it also makes us human. The unexpected evidence. The prosecutor was preparing its closing arguments when something unexpected happened. A signal came through from the Galactic Scientific Council. They'd been monitoring New Providence's star for the past 3 weeks, studying the effects of James's interference. The lead scientist, an elderly Zorath with scales that had faded to pale gray with age, appeared as a hologram. Honorable judges, I have findings that are relevant to this trial. The Chromath judge gestured permission. Proceed. We have analyzed the quantum stabilizer's effects on the star. Our models predicted catastrophic consequences. Radiation bursts. Gravitational anomalies. Possible dimensional rifts. The old scientist paused. None of these things occurred. The star is stable. More than stable, actually. The quantum stabilizer appears to have corrected not just the immediate instability but several underlying structural flaws in the star's core. If anything, the star is now healthier than it was before. Another wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the courtroom. That's impossible, the prosecutor sputtered. The Vorton disaster was caused by primitive technology and incomplete understanding, the scientist interrupted. Human quantum theory is surprisingly advanced for such a young species. Their stabilizer is elegant. Sophisticated. It works with the star's natural processes rather than against them. The Chromath judge's scales shifted through several colors. Are you saying the human's interference caused no harm? I'm saying more than that. The scientist's hologram zoomed in on complex equations. Based on our analysis, this technology could revolutionize how we interact with stellar bodies. It could extend the life of aging stars. Prevent supernovas. Save countless worlds that we've always believed were doomed. James felt hope flicker in his chest for the first time in weeks. The scientist continued. The eternal law was created after a disaster caused by primitive technology. But technology advances. Understanding deepens. What was impossible 50,000 years ago might be possible today. The humans have proven that. The verdict that changed everything. The judges withdrew to deliberate. James was escorted back to his holding cell. Hours passed. Then days. The waiting was torture, but James tried to stay hopeful. The scientific evidence was in his favor. Surely they would see that he'd been right to take the risk. On the third day, he was brought back to the courtroom. The chamber was more crowded than before. Word had spread about the trial. Species from across the galaxy wanted to witness the verdict. The Chromath judge spoke. "Captain James Rivera, this court has reached a decision. The evidence shows that your actions did not cause the catastrophic consequences we feared. Your quantum stabilizer worked as intended, and New Providence's star is stable. 4 million lives were saved." James allowed himself to breathe. However, the judge continued, and James's heart sank. The law exists not because of what happened, but because of what could have happened. You took an enormous risk. You gambled with forces beyond any single individual's right to control. You could have been wrong. The stabilizer could have failed. And then your attempt to save millions could have killed billions. The judge's 6 eyes fixed on James. You broke the eternal law. Whatever the outcome, that violation cannot be ignored. This court finds you guilty. James felt the words like a physical blow. Guilty. After everything, after saving 4 million people, after proving the technology worked, he was still guilty. However, the gaseous judge added, "This court must also acknowledge that you have revealed a flaw in our wisdom. We have been so afraid of past failures that we stopped trying to succeed. You humans, reckless though you may be, have shown us that old laws must sometimes be challenged for progress to occur." The Chromath judge continued. "Therefore, while we find you guilty of breaking the eternal law, we sentence you to nothing. No punishment. Instead, you will work with our scientific council to develop protocols for safe stellar intervention. Your quantum stabilizer technology will be studied and, if proven consistently safe, shared with all spacefaring species." James blinked in shock. "I don't understand." "You broke a law that needed to be broken," the judge explained. "You were right, and we were wrong. The eternal law served its purpose for 50,000 years, but it has outlived its usefulness. As of today, it is repealed. Stellar intervention will be permitted under strict scientific oversight." The courtroom erupted. Some species applauded. Others protested loudly. The translator in James's ear gave up trying to keep track of all the different reactions. The Chromath judge raised a hand for silence. "Captain Rivera, you asked why humans believe they know better than species millions of years older. You said it was because you're too young to have learned to give up. Perhaps that is exactly what the galaxy needs. New perspectives. Fresh courage. The willingness to question ancient wisdom." James was released from his restraints. As he rubbed his wrists, the old Zorith scientist approached him. "Your species will change the galaxy, human. You already have. In 3 weeks, you accomplished what we couldn't in 50,000 years. You proved that impossible problems can sometimes be solved if you're brave enough to try. A new beginning." News of the trial spread across human space within hours. James became an instant celebrity, though he hated the attention. He just wanted to get back to work. But before he could leave the tribunal station, he received a message from New Providence. It was a video feed showing crowds of people in the colony's main square. They were celebrating. Children held signs that read, "Thank you Captain Rivera," and "Heroes don't give up." One voice rose above the others, a young girl speaking into a camera. "My name is Emma Chen. I'm 7 years old. I live on New Providence with my mom and dad and my baby brother. Captain Rivera saved us. He didn't give up even when everyone said it was impossible. When I grow up, I want to be just like him." James felt tears stinging his eyes. This was why he'd taken the risk. This was why breaking the law had been worth it. 4 million people like Emma, living their lives, having futures, because one human had refused to accept the unacceptable, the revolution that followed. The technology that changed everything. 3 months after the trial, James found himself in the strangest situation of his life. He was teaching quantum physics to beings who'd been studying the universe since before humans had invented the wheel. The classroom, if you could call it that, was a massive orbital facility above Earth. Representatives from 30 different species gathered there to learn about the quantum stabilizer technology. Some were scientists. Others were engineers. All of them were curious about how a species barely 1,000 years into space travel had solved a problem that had stumped the galaxy for 50 millennia. Dr. Sarah Kim, the lead physicist who developed the stabilizer, stood beside James at the front of the room. She pulled up a holographic display showing complex equations that made James's head hurt to look at. The key, she explained through the translation field, was that we didn't try to stop the star's death. We accepted that the collapse was natural and inevitable. What we did was redirect the energy. The Cien scientist raised a tentacle. Redirect it where? Into pocket dimensions, Sarah said. Tiny quantum bubbles that exist outside normal spacetime. The energy that would have caused the supernova is still being released. It's just happening in a place where it can't hurt anyone. The room buzzed with excited chatter. James watched alien scientists furiously taking notes or speaking into recording devices. An elderly chromath, the same species as the judge from the trial, approached James. I have studied stellar mechanics for 600 of your years, it said quietly. In all that time, I never thought to question the assumption that stellar death had to occur in normal space. Your species thinks differently. That's your greatest strength. James smiled. We're good at asking why not. Yes, the chromath agreed. And the galaxy is better for it. The stars that got second chances. Within a year, quantum stabilizers were being deployed across the galaxy. The technology worked even better than the initial tests had suggested. Stars that had been dying for decades were stabilized. Entire solar systems were saved from destruction. The colony world of Varan 4 had been evacuated 20 years earlier when its sun began to fail. Now, with a stabilizer in place, the colonists were returning. They named their rebuilt capital city Rivera, in honor of the human who'd made their second chance possible. The Koresh, a species of methane breathers who'd lost their homeworld to a supernova 3 centuries ago, finally had a chance to reclaim it. The star that had destroyed their planet was revived and stabilized. It would take generations to terraform the world back to habitability, but the Koresh were patient. They had their home back. But the most dramatic save happened in the Anali system. A supermassive star was on the verge of collapse, threatening to create a black hole that would have consumed 6 inhabited planets. The Anali people, a peaceful species of artists and philosophers, had accepted their fate with quiet dignity. James led the mission himself. It took 3 ships and 14 quantum stabilizers working in perfect coordination. The star was so massive and so unstable that even Sarah wasn't sure they could save it. If this goes wrong, she warned James over the comm system, the resulting explosion will be visible from 100 light-years away. Then let's make sure it doesn't go wrong, James replied. They deployed the stabilizers in a carefully calculated pattern around the star's equator. For 10 agonizing minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the star's violent oscillations began to smooth out. The deadly instability faded. The collapse was reversed. 6 planets and 40 billion Anali were saved. The Anali ambassador contacted James personally after the mission. She was a tall, graceful being with silver skin and eyes that shimmered like starlight. You have given my species a gift we can never repay, she said, her voice thick with emotion. In our language, there is a word, Therocaine. It means the one who gives life when death seems certain. You are Therocaine to 40 billion souls. James didn't know what to say. He'd just been doing his job, using the technology humans had developed. But as he looked at the gratitude in the ambassador's eyes, he understood something important. This wasn't just about saving stars. It was about hope. It was about proving that impossible problems could be solved if you refused to give up. The opposition that refused to die. Not everyone celebrated the quantum stabilizer revolution. A coalition of conservative species formed, calling themselves the keepers of natural law. They argued that humans were playing with forces they didn't fully understand. They said the long-term consequences of stellar interference couldn't be predicted. Their leader was a Zephron named Krelvar, an ancient being whose species had existed for 5 million years. He gave speeches across the galaxy, warning of impending disaster. The humans are children, he declared at a galactic council meeting. They have existed for the blink of an eye. They know nothing of the deep patterns of the cosmos. The eternal law was created for good reason. By repealing it, we have invited catastrophe. James was at that same council meeting. When Krelvar finished his speech, James stood up to respond. "You're right that we're young," James said. "Humans have only been in space for a fraction of the time most of you have. But maybe that's an advantage, not a weakness. You've had millions of years to become set in your ways. To decide that some problems can't be solved. We haven't had time to learn that lesson yet." He pulled up data showing the success rate of quantum stabilizers. Out of 237 deployments across the galaxy, 237 had worked perfectly. 0 catastrophic failures. 0 unintended consequences. The eternal law was based on one disaster 50,000 years ago, James continued. One failure with primitive technology. But we've had 237 successes with modern technology. At what point do we acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, we've learned something new? Krelvar's response was cold. 237 successes mean nothing if the 238th deployment causes the catastrophe I predict. You are gambling with the entire galaxy, human. When the disaster comes, and it will come, your species will bear the responsibility. The debate raged for months. But as more stars were saved and more worlds were preserved, public opinion shifted. The keepers of natural law found fewer and fewer supporters. Even Krelvar's own species, the Zephrons, began to quietly distance themselves from his position. The discovery that changed everything again. 2 years after the trial, a human survey ship made a discovery in an uncharted region of space. They found a graveyard. Thousands of dead stars, their cores collapsed, surrounded by the shattered remains of planets. But these weren't natural deaths. Analysis showed that every star had died in exactly the same way. Some kind of quantum instability had been deliberately introduced into their cores, causing rapid collapse. James was called in to investigate. What he found made his blood run cold. The instability pattern was identical to what had been affecting New Providence's sun. And it had been artificially created. Someone or something is killing stars on purpose, Sarah said, staring at the data. This isn't natural. This is murder on a cosmic scale. Further investigation revealed the truth. An ancient automated defense system, created by a species long extinct, had been dormant for millions of years. When humans started interfering with stellar processes, it woke up. And it was programmed to destroy any civilization that tried to manipulate stars. The machine, which they named the Stellar Purge, had already destroyed 17 human-saved stars. The quantum stabilizers had been removed or destroyed, and the stars had been allowed to die. 3 colony worlds had been evacuated just in time. A 4th hadn't been so lucky. New Bradford, a small mining colony with 20,000 inhabitants, had been caught by surprise. The Stellar Purge had struck their star without warning. The colony had 4 hours to evacuate. They'd managed to get 18,000 people off the planet before the star went supernova. 2,000 people died. Men, women, and children who'd been going about their daily lives, never knowing they were being targeted by an ancient machine. James stared at the casualty reports, rage and grief warring inside him. Krelvar and the keepers of natural law were already making statements, saying this proved they'd been right all along. That human interference had awakened a sleeping monster. But James saw it differently. This isn't proof that we were wrong, he said at an emergency council meeting. This is proof that someone out there doesn't want us to save stars. Which means we're doing something right. Something that threatens whatever programmed that machine. He pulled up a star map showing the graveyard they'd discovered. Look at this. Thousands of dead stars, all killed the same way. This machine has been doing this for who knows how long. Preventing species from learning how to save their stars. Keeping the galaxy trapped in ignorance and fear. The Chromath counselor who judged his trial spoke up. "What are you suggesting, Captain?" "I'm suggesting we stop it," James said simply. "We find the stellar purge machine. We shut it down. And we make sure no one else dies because some extinct species decided the galaxy wasn't allowed to progress." The hunt for the machine. The stellar purge wasn't easy to find. It moved through subspace, appearing only to strike at newly stabilized stars before vanishing again. It was fast, heavily armored, and completely autonomous. No one was piloting it. It was following programming millions of years old. But humans had something the stellar purge's creators hadn't counted on: stubbornness. James assembled a task force. Human ships, Anali vessels, Koresh cruisers, even a few Chromath research ships. They deployed a network of quantum sensors across the galaxy, watching for the telltale signature of the machine's subspace drives. It took 6 months, but they finally got a solid track. The stellar purge was heading for the terminus system, where a quantum stabilizer had just been deployed. James's ship, the Defiance, arrived first. The stellar purge was already there, its weapons charging to destroy the stabilizer. "All ships, this is Rivera," James said into the comm. "We're not letting it take another star. We're not letting more people die. Whatever it takes, we stop this thing here." The battle was fierce. The stellar purge had weapons that shouldn't have been possible. Energy beams that could crack a planet. Missiles that moved faster than light. Shields that regenerated instantly. But the task force had something better: diversity. 40 different species, each contributing their unique technologies and tactics. The Anali had gravitational weapons that disrupted the machine's shields. The Koresh had corrosive gases that ate through its armor. The humans had good old-fashioned stubbornness and an unwillingness to quit. James's ship took heavy damage. Hull breaches vented atmosphere. The quantum drive was failing. But he kept fighting, kept firing, kept refusing to back down. And then Sarah had an idea. "The stellar purge targets quantum stabilizers," she said over the comm. "What if we gave it too many targets? What if we overloaded its threat assessment systems?" James understood immediately. "Deploy every spare stabilizer we have. Turn them all on at once. Make it think there are 100 threats instead of one." They did it. Quantum stabilizers activated all around the stellar purge. The machine's sensors went haywire. It didn't know which target to prioritize. Its weapons fired randomly, hitting nothing. In that moment of confusion, the Anali ships hit it with a gravitational pulse that collapsed its shields. The Koresh followed up with a volley of corrosive missiles that ate through its armor. And James, piloting the damaged Defiance on manual control, flew straight at the machine's exposed core. "This is for New Bradford," he said quietly. "This is for everyone who died because your creators were too afraid to let the galaxy progress." He fired every weapon the Defiance had left. Missiles. Energy beams. Even the emergency thruster fuel, ignited and directed at the machine's core. The stellar purge exploded in a flash of light that was visible across 3 star systems. When the debris settled, James's ship was barely holding together. But the terminus system's star was safe. The quantum stabilizer was intact. And the ancient machine that had been killing stars for millions of years was finally dead. The legacy that endured. The destruction of the stellar purge became a turning point. Species across the galaxy realized that the eternal law hadn't just been about preventing accidents. It had been enforced, deliberately, by an automated system designed to keep civilizations from progressing. Kralvar and the Keepers of Natural Law quietly disbanded. Even the most conservative species had to admit that humans had been right. Some laws needed to be broken, especially laws enforced by dead civilizations that wanted to control the living. James was offered medals, honors, positions of power. He turned them all down. He just wanted to get back to work, saving stars and helping people. But before he could leave Earth, he received one more visitor. It was the young girl from New Providence, Emma Chen. She was 10 now, tall and confident, with dreams of becoming a starship captain. "Mr. Rivera," she said, shaking his hand with a grip that suggested she'd been practicing. "I wanted to thank you again. And I wanted you to know that I've decided what I want to do with my life." "What's that?" James asked. Emma smiled. "I want to do what you do. I want to save people. I want to solve impossible problems. I want to show the galaxy that just because something's never been done doesn't mean it can't be done." James felt his throat tighten with emotion. "The galaxy needs more people like you, Emma." "No," she said seriously. "The galaxy needs more people like you. But I'll do my best to learn from your example." As James watched her walk away, he thought about everything that had happened. He'd broken an ancient law. He'd been put on trial. He'd fought a killer machine. And through it all, he'd just been trying to do the right thing. That was the human way. Not accepting the unacceptable. Not giving up when things seemed impossible. Not letting ancient fears and old laws prevent progress. The galaxy was changing because of it. Stars were being saved. Species were working together in ways they never had before. And a new generation, represented by kids like Emma Chen, was growing up believing that impossible was just another word for not yet achieved. Maybe humans were reckless. Maybe they were too young and too foolish to know better. Or maybe they were exactly what the galaxy needed. James smiled and headed back to his ship. There were more stars to save, more impossible problems to solve, and more ancient laws that probably needed breaking. And he couldn't wait to get started.